Hello, and welcome back to Friendly Ties. Today, I'm here with my friends Jonathan and Nick, and we are going to be talking about Maracaibo Uprising, which is the expansion to Maracaibo that just came out this year in 2022. You could be listening to this in any year, but right now in 2022, this has just come out. And we've had the opportunity to play this a couple of times together. I think Nick and John have played it a time themselves with another friend of ours. And we've been having a lot of fun with this one. So let's dive in and talk about it.
Yeah, so this is the first time we're highlighting an expansion, which is kind of interesting. And we've talked about Maracaibo quite a bit. Well, I guess you all did in a previous episode where we did, I keep saying we. It was Anastasia and Nick. It was the two of you doing strategy. And today we're going to really just branch off from that again and also take a similar stance to the previous strategy episode where we're not going to go into a description of how the base game really works. We'll be sort of assuming you are relatively familiar with the game, although we'll try to give you some framework for sure. I will say that from a John Gets Games perspective, which is my YouTube channel, I did make a tutorial video for that one. So if you are at all interested in learning how Maracaibo plays, if you want to watch that before this episode, I totally understand. And I put a link to that in the description of this episode. Now, this expansion actually brings in 4 different modules that you can play, or I guess scenarios is a better way to put it. And we've played 2 of them, but overall, the main idea is 2 of these modules are a fully cooperative experience, which is very different from the base game because that's a competitive. And then the other 2 modules are competitive. We played one of the cooperative ones and one of the competitive ones, and we're going to talk about those today. We're going to do some cross comparison and all that kind of stuff. We want to start with the cooperative, though, certainly I do, because I feel like I'm slightly more excited about that one because it really turns this game on its head. The expansion is called Uprising, and the main idea thematically is that instead of fighting for Europe in the Caribbean like you do in the base game, you can now be a part of the Uprising and actually fight against Europe, removing them from the Caribbean while still doing a whole bunch of Maracaibo type stuff. So in the cooperative game that we played, Europe already started, like, they controlled everything, and then we collectively kicked them out. And I really enjoyed the overall experience, and I'm curious how it played out for you two.
So when it comes to expansions, I'm a total cheapskate and I almost never like to pick them up. And I really want an expansion to do something just very fundamentally different with the game. Like I want to feel like I just purchased a second game essentially. And I think the co-op version of Maracaibo does this. You're still playing Maracaibo in this game. There's no question about it. But I was really impressed by how the cooperative was executed in this.
Well, actually, of the 4 modules in this expansion, the cooperative is actually your favorite, right, John?
Yeah, it is. I mean, I've played a decent amount of competitive Maracaibo, but the cooperative one really, I guess, surprised me with how different and familiar it felt. There's a couple things that are different with it. For one thing, you're fighting against Jacques collectively. It's essentially a super
Jacques.
Yeah. Jacques is a super easy AI to facilitate. You just draw a card every single time it's their turn, and then they do something simple and they get a bunch of points. And the thing is, everyone needs to get a bigger score than Jacques, which is kind of cool. It means that just because one person is doing really well and doesn't mean you're all going to win. Like, everybody needs to beat Jacques. So maybe somebody needs to sacrifice some good moves to make somebody else around the table do well because, it's cooperative. There's also some asymmetries and whatnot. But, fighting against this entity together, I just found it really fun to be playing Maracaibo in all the Maracaibo-y ways while, talking everything through and working together. We actually recorded a playthrough of this one, the 3 of us. This was a little bit ago, And this one is actually a Patreon exclusive. Most of these playthroughs that we've recorded go out onto the main channel. This one was recorded when we were still developing some things. The play was super fun. I definitely recommend you check it out if you are a Patreon subscriber of the channel, even though there's maybe a little bit of funny business with the pink screen that we tried out there. It was a really fun time, and maybe we won. Or maybe we didn't. We're definitely going to be referencing that play as we go through this episode, while trying not to spoil how ultimately it went. So yeah, that was actually the only time that you, Anastasia, have played this game. So I'm curious, what did you think about it?
Yeah, well, so that was a really interesting experience. So, what was really fun about it is Nick and I have played a ton of Maracaibo. We've also played with John. Obviously, we've talked Maracaibo strategy, and we've always played the game online. So not only was that my first time playing Uprising, it was also my first time playing Maracaibo in person ever. So that was actually just
It's been
really
a long
cool.
pandemic.
It has been a long pandemic. And it's funny because I own Maracaibo and it just sits on my shelf. So what was really fun about that was just kind of taking in the whole experience, but also just some little elements about the game that are really nice about this expansion. There's these double layer boards. There's just little upgrades and improvements. But what was so fun about that experience is that we also haven't played a ton of games together in person. And so sitting around the table with you guys, I was having the hardest time sitting down, playing Maracaibo cooperatively, trying to figure out, how do I play Maracaibo without trying to beat Nick? Like, I just didn't realize, like, my entire experience with Maracaibo has been through this lens of like trying to beat Nick at Maracaibo. Like, Nick taught me Maracaibo. I don't know, Nick, I don't know what happened. Anyways, so it was like sitting there and you guys were making fun of me. I kept being like, okay, so I'm going to score more points. And they just kept saying to me, you do know this is a cooperative game. Like, it took me at least a full round of the game to start to be like, okay, we are trying to work together. Because I was like, sure, we're working together. Wink, wink. I'm going to have more points than both of you at the end of this. And yet I was very pleased to see that you were still kind of able to do that. One of my kind of concerns about it is when they had kind of told me, when Nick and John had played it before and they had kind of mentioned it, John was like, oh, I just very willingly like took turns that were super lame. And I was like, why would you ever do that, John? And I could now see that there's this really fun aspect of trying to beat Jacques, to trying to kind of play your best game. And it also opened itself up to some great opportunities. Like, I mean, before we even started, I don't actually know if this is on camera, but like Nick and I just traded hands. I was like, look, your hand's better than mine. Now, that's not part of the game at all. It's totally cheating. But it encouraged it. The environment of playing it kind of was like, hey, this is fun. Like, we're going to play together. And we had a great time with it.
I don't think that's cheating. I mean, maybe I missed it, but I don't remember reading anything in the rule book that said you can't show cards, that you can't talk. Like, there's no communication guidelines at all.
We full on traded our hands.
Yeah. There's no rule in the rule book says I can't give you $5 either, but I'm pretty sure that's frowned upon.
Oh, you mean you never traded the cards back? You just...
No. Like,
we looked at our starting hands, and I was like, "This one's better for you," and she was like, "Great," and then gave me her cards,
which we never would have done if we were playing competitive Maracaibo. Like, no way.
And so there's mechanical differences to cooperative versus competitive, but I think one thing I really want to highlight is the non-mechanical difference that I think all of us really felt in certainly both the times that Nick and I played it as well, where suddenly you're just talking so much. There's so much to discuss when you play Maracaibo cooperatively, because there's so many aspects to this game that interact with your opponents. For example, the explorer track. You can never land where somebody else is, but you can leapfrog over them. And in the competitive game, that's oftentimes part of the minigame, is trying to leapfrog over somebody before they run away, and then they try to leapfrog over you before you run away to keep things, to stop being efficient for your opponents. But now when you flip that on its head and you're playing cooperatively, we were frequently talking about, like, okay, I'm thinking about moving up on the track, and then somebody would say, could you wait one round? I want to move up on the track. I want to jump over you, and then you can jump over me. I'm like, that sounds great. I'm glad we had this conversation. I'm going to do something else. And I think that's maybe what Anastasia was alluding to a little bit with, like, not doing the big turn that I was planning on doing, putting it off a little bit and maybe doing some slightly mediocre turn and then doing the big turn next turn so that somebody else can also have a really big turn. And I really like that. Also, the timing of the game, you still play 4 rounds. This truly just felt like playing Maracaibo, but it happened to be cooperative. And a big part of the competitive game is ending the round when other people are not ready for the round to be ended. And like, oh no, I have to do this and that, and I was hoping to do more. Oh well. Well, in a cooperative game, we were frequently just asking, how many more actions does everybody want to take? Should I end this? I don't know. Should you end this? And I loved that conversation.
Yeah, I think that conversation piece is what made the cooperative game so much fun. It's the mechanics are fine, or the mechanisms are fine for it, right? Like they do the trick, but really what the design is clever in is that it gets out of your way to play this game together.
Yeah.
And it seems like it shouldn't work, but I think it does. And I thought about this a little bit. Every time you sit down to play this game, you're trying to play your best game. You're trying to score the most points, as Anastasia was saying earlier. And you're still trying to score the most points when you are playing the cooperative version of the game. Yes, you have an extra thing that you need to pay attention to knock out the European settlers, but that also gives you some reward. So that's fine. You're still just trying to score the most points you can. But the thing that Maracaibo has when you're playing competitive is this like race. Like, I'm going to go to this city and discard the good for the upgrade, the ship upgrade there. And all of a sudden it's like, wait, are you going to go and ship upgrade there? Because I have a different other pretty good play that I could do instead. It's like, yeah, I was really hoping to go there. It's like, okay, cool. I'll do this other plan then. And that like ability to sort of like weave between each other and make the decisions of, how can I play this game while getting out of your way, rather than how can I play this game and get in your way, was really dynamic.
Yeah, and I like I said, it took some adjustment to kind of like think, okay, how does that work? And then on the flip side, here we go, we play this cooperative game, and the funny part is that you actually can get so lost in kind of helping each other and playing your best game that you can almost forget about Jock, except for the fact
Shock.
Except for the fact that, like, here we are playing this, and we get to the end, and this is complete and full spoilers if you are planning to go watch the playthrough on John's Patreon campaign. But it gets to the very end, and we forgot that if you don't push back the Europeans from the board, you lose. And here we are, we're like playing, we think we've got this figured out. And then I didn't have enough military to push them back in the last turn. And so we just lost. And they had like set it all up so that I could take the military, and we just hadn't calculated it right. And we'd let him by that point run so far ahead because
him being Jacques.
Because Jacques does want you to take less turns going on the round, but you can go slower because you're not trying to beat each other. So like he has multiple difficulties, and I guess we were playing him at hard, and he just beat us by so many points, but it didn't matter because we just lost. And but that was fabulous and fun, and we couldn't believe we'd done it, and we just laughed and laughed and laughed, and it was one of the most enjoyable experiences I've ever had playing Maracaibo, and I've had a lot of them, so it was a good time.
Yeah, I also got kind of lost in the fun of just doing stuff and taking long rounds, but that sneaky Jacques, every single round, boom, 5 points, boom, 10 points, boom, 10 points, and at the end of each one of the overall rounds of the game, we're like getting ready for the next round of the game, and how many points did Jacques get? Oh, Jacques got 50 points, and we're all just like, ugh. And then we start playing, and we just kind of get lulled into the fun of the game again, and the round would end, it's like, ugh. It was really kind of funny. Like, we were playing a cooperative game, but we were almost playing like a Care Bear game. Like we were truly just playing for the play to a certain extent, and then we just lost so hard. But I will say, like you alluded to, that was Jacques on hard mode. The first time we played was Jacques on medium, and we won relatively handily. I'm not sure why there was such a gulf there. Maybe we were just being a little bit too cavalier. I think it's very likely that the cooperative game, when played against the higher difficulties, is still a race, because Jacques can get so many easy points that you really do kind of have to weigh, like, okay, cool, I want to take one more action. Nick wants to take 2 more actions. Nick, is that second action worth Jacques getting 10 points? Maybe not. And in that case, maybe that's kind of a conversation we could have. But that's not the conversation we had, and we still had a freaking great time.
Yeah. My last thoughts about the co-op here is that because you're playing cooperatively and you're trying to get out of each other's way, you're a little bit more incentivized to try strategies or mess around with cards that you normally wouldn't.
Yeah.
It's first of all, like, you don't feel as bad for like dropping the strategy ball, and second of all, you're like, okay, well, I'll do this, which is like a little orthogonal to your 2 strategies, so we're cooperating in that I'm not getting in your way to do this kind of thing. So I liked that it encouraged me to explore more of the game. And along with that, when someone else generates a cool combo, and you're like, oh, those cards are so good together, you have enthusiasm for that person rather than like a jealousy feeling. And B, at the end of the game, or when the game is nearing the end, you know which player is the one who's going to like take the kind of like not as good actions to push towards the end of the game, because they're ahead on points. And so it's like, okay, I want to make sure that you're scoring the maximum because your beginning of game was not as strong. And that's cool.
Yeah. What I really like is that it actually encouraged me to be like, hey, Nick, like, look at this card. Like, what do you think? Like, or John, like, which of these should I play? Or like, which path should I take? Or hey, I'm thinking about this. Like, there was just like, I had a better awareness of what you guys were doing, and I felt like I played the game even better because it was this kind of collective experience rather than me being like, oh, I have to hide these cards on my, and if I put this on my shelf, they're going to know what I'm going to do. And like, in a competitive game, you're not as inclined to show your hands, if you will. And this is just much more fluid. I would draw a card and be like, look how cool this is. Like, and I wonder if I do this with this. And then it's like, and even if you are taking a quote unquote lame turn, it doesn't feel that way because maybe you've set it up so that, John's going to get this crazy combo and he's going to get to go here and do this. And so you're like, in a way, participating in that action. You've made it happen. And that was really fun. And then the fact that Jacques, he does a number of things, including taking quests off the board. So even though I think a couple of times I was like, okay, I'm going to skip this, but John's going to go get it or Nick's going to go get it. And then Jacques just took it away. And don't take that map. I'm going to take that map. Like, it just, there's a lot of little elements of that you don't even think. Like, I want to fully admit, I didn't think co-op Maracaibo would be fun. But it actually really is. I feel like if I had a headline like for this, I'd be like, I really didn't think this would be fun. Actively, I didn't say like avoided it, but I just definitely wasn't like, yeah, guys, let's do that.
It was a little hard to pin you down to get you to play this.
Yeah,
Nick and I are both
not
just like,
excited.
you're going to like it. And you're like, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a lot more fun than I expected.
Now, we haven't really gone into the mechanical nuts and bolts of the differences between the games, and I don't really want to delve into that too much, but there is one mechanical elephant that isn't in the room that I do think we have to talk about, and that's the influence tracks. A huge part of base Maracaibo are these 3 influence tracks with Spain, England, and France. And as you are fighting for those countries in the base game, you're gaining influence in them. And this becomes a potentially monstrous victory point multiplier near the end of the game. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but when I listened to your Maracaibo strategy, it definitely seemed like you were saying, like, you have to play the influence track in order to win the game. And then the cooperative version comes around, and you completely excise that entire mechanic from the game. You just ignore the influence tracks entirely. You don't put those, no cubes ever go there. There's no more multipliers. And I think some people were incredulous about this. Nick, were you incredulous about its omission, considering how fundamental it is to the base game?
I don't see it as an omission. I think that it is even you literally cannot win the game if you don't fight. If you don't succeed at knocking all the Europeans out, you've lost. And so even more so, you have to fight to win the game.
I guess that's true.
And they just changed the way that rewards are handed out through this system. I think the rewards are a little bit less dynamic maybe than they were in the base game, and I think that's completely okay.
I think, I'm going to be honest, like the fact that there was no quote fighting, I'm just going to call it the fighting in the game, like, and I say no fighting because Nick is completely right that you have to fight in order to keep the Europeans back. And that's 100% why we lost. And I'm going to totally take some of the blame for that because I like started that playthrough and I was like, I don't have to fight. I'm not going to fight. You guys deal with that problem. And, that obviously didn't help. Because, and
cooperative game.
All Nick was saying to me the whole time. Yeah, cooperative. It means we're a team and not everyone on the team has to do everything. Right. Some of us could do other things.
There's no I do work in team, right?
You two deal with that. No, I honestly, that the reason I say that is because my least favorite part of Maracaibo is the fighting, which I know is kind of like backwards given how important it is. But I don't like it. And part of the reason I don't like it is because for some reason, it doesn't matter how many times I played this game, I cannot wrap my mind around it. There is something about keeping track of which country has the most influence or which swords or which things are like, or the point benefit that I'm going to get. Like it's starting to sink in, but I have played Maracaibo like, I don't know, almost a dozen times. Like, and it's still for me, just doesn't click for my brain just naturally. And I still will be like, Nick, explain this, or Nick, which one should I fight for? Poor Nick. I'm always being like, because I know, Nick, I know you just get it, right? Like, so it's very easy for you to parse, and the amount of time it's going to take me to parse, it's just going to slow the game down. So in some ways that's a crutch, and you should stop telling me, and then I'd be forced to, finally learn it. So I say all of that because, and I do understand it, but I say all of that because that was actually the piece of this co-op that made me most want to play it. I was like, okay, there's no fighting. And to me, that is one of the best parts in it. Yes, you have to fight, but it's completely different.
There's no influence track.
There's no influence. There's not, you don't have to compute. Yeah. You don't have to figure out which one to fight for and all of this and which one's the best and nothing. It's just, it's very simple. It gives you some great benefits for doing it. So even though I said like, you guys deal with the fighting, but halfway through I was like, ooh, fighting's kind of fun. Like it gives you like, you get rewards for it. I was like, let's do this. Like, so I love it. I love that part of it. I'm great with the excision of influence tracks on board.
Well, how do you two feel about switching over and talking about competitive or all-inclusive Uprising at this point?
Yeah, let's do it.
It's called all-inclusive. That's the
name of the scenario. Yes, that's the name of the scenario. So, so we played Cooperative, the three of us, and that was the second time for Nick and I. And after that game, the three of us talked a bunch, and we were just like, we should make a Friendly Ties episode. But I adamantly felt like we needed to play one of the competitive ways that come in the expansion before we could talk about it, and I'm really glad that we did. So, as I said way back at the beginning of this, there's 4 scenarios. 2 of them are competitive. One of them is just competitive Uprising, where everybody is competitively fighting against Europe. So it's a lot like the co-op in that there is no influence tracks or anything like that. The other way that you can play is called all-inclusive, and it's kind of like Ultimate Maracaibo, realistically. That'd probably be a better name for it, because the influence tracks come back, and now what happens is everyone are truly mercenaries. Every time you do an attack, you decide if you're going to fight for or against each of the countries. So you're not just fighting against, you're not just fighting for, you're making that decision while also deciding who you're going to fight for or against. And now this whole incentivization mechanic comes into play, because if you remember from before, in the co-op Uprising, when you fight, you remove cubes from the board. But standard Maracaibo, when you fight, you add cubes to the board. So in all-inclusive, if you fight for Europe, you put cubes on the board and you get stuff just like base Maracaibo. But if instead you decide to fight for the Uprising, you remove those cubes. And the more cubes that are on the board when you remove a cube, the more stuff you get in the form of victory points. So essentially, the longer the game goes with nobody fighting for the Uprising, the more lucrative it becomes to fight for the Uprising. And the inverse is also possible, where I suppose if people just go crazy kicking cubes out, then the incentive to kick more cubes out is lower, so maybe it makes more sense to add some cubes in.
This was a flop for me. I
just right out the gate.
Yeah, just okay.
I thought I was gonna like it. I really did. I mean, because I love this game first of all, and I really like thematically the idea of this. Right, like you just you can also fight for the natives to kick out European colonizers, and then further, like the idea that when you would make those decisions, changes seems like that to me is like, oh great, like then I like really have to pay attention. And then in practice, what I found was that it was taxing to pay attention to I'm gonna fight for one of these nations, or I'm gonna fight for the Caribbean peoples, and at the end of the day was like a lot of counting and recounting, and now I need to see how many cities there are left, and is it worth it to do this one or that one, and it just added like an extra layer to what was already a robust system that I just didn't think added enough to merit the additional overhead.
I completely agree with you, Nick. If I thought that, I was like, Nick, explain which one I should fight for was already happening,
now.
Then now it's like double, triple that. And almost frustratingly so, actually, because in this play that we did of competitive Maracaibo, I was actually trying to do a military strategy because, I fully admit it's not something I really felt like I grokked. So I was like, okay, I'm going to just do it until I'm just going to get it into my head, right? So I'm going to just go all military in this game. And I was so focused on doing that, I like almost couldn't compute this idea of fighting for the natives. And Nick was over doing something else too. And so John comes along and he's like, oh, I'll do that. And then suddenly John's like getting 15 points off of fighting, and then Nick's like, I'm gonna do it now, and it's like there's also a lot of other stuff going on in this all-inclusive module, so adding in this layer, it was almost just frustrating to be like, yeah, okay, well, if I stopped the game right now and spent 5 minutes computing which way to fight, like that'd be good, but like I know I'd probably get more points if I did this, and if I got them to help me figure out which one, it would be good. But like, it's just, yeah, I really wanted to like it more, but it's almost frustrating to me that this element is here, because it does seem like so much more computational energy is needed, when I loved Big L loved the rest of what Uprising had to offer, which I'm sure we'll talk about right now, but I don't know quite how to hold the love of all of that with now what is just an even harder mathematical puzzle that I'm going to have to go through if I want to keep playing competitive Uprising.
So I do want to emphasize, I guess at this point, that we've only played one of the two ways that we can competitively, and we did the ultimate Maracaibo, in quotes, John's version, John's term for it, and like you said, it did feel like there was a lot more to compute. I do wonder what the competitive version of the just Uprising would be like, where we again...
are you saying there is a version that we can play without this like super influence track fighting?
Exactly,
thing?
yeah. You can play it where it's just like the cooperative mode, except it's competitive.
What?
So there's no influence tracks. You start with cubes all over the board, and then when you fight, you just always fight against Europe, and now you're removing the cubes and doing all that stuff.
100%. Why did you make me play this other version?
I wanted to play Ultimate Maracaibo.
100%. Okay, everything I just said, I just ignore it, because oh my god, the game I'm so excited now. Oh my god, when can we play this? Let's just stop recording and go play.
Well, I mean, like I said, I kind of just wanted to try all of it all at once, and maybe
no. You were totally right to do that. I just didn't realize that was in it. This is
Yeah.
exciting.
And again, there's 4 scenarios, and we've only played 2 of them. So, if we did our due diligence, we would have done all 4 of them. But, logistically, we felt like we had a lot to talk about now. And so I just wanted to be very clear about that. Now, one thing that really jumped out to me, again, kind of like I said for the cooperative, the one thing that jumped out to me wasn't mechanical. It was the vibe of the play again. We played Cooperative Maracaibo. I played it twice before we went into this, and suddenly the game was so quiet. We were playing competitively again. We're trying to beat each other in this Euro game, and we're not talking because we're looking at our cards, making these plans, trying to, subvert the other players. And I found myself really missing the discussion again. Like maybe I just got super stuck on the newness of the cooperative, but the omission of that discussion felt like a gaping omission, I guess.
You had that Thanksgiving experience where everyone is talking at the table and having a wonderful time, and then the food comes out and everyone stops talking because they're stuffing their face, and you wish they were talking because the conversation was so good.
Yeah, something like that. I just think the vibe of the table is definitely going to be an impact on my fun for the game, and I was surprised at how much that did impact things.
I think it feels like what normal Maracaibo feels like. So if you're looking for competitive play, that's still going to be there. Like the impression I'm getting, John, is that it has changed your perception, like base perception of like what it means to play Maracaibo. And so now, right, what I'm hearing is maybe you'd just rather play cooperative all the time.
I mean, that is essentially where I'm at. I mean, I will say, us kind of talking this through and, kind of, mentioning that we have not played pure Uprising competitively does make me want to visit that, and I totally will, because I think there is interest in that. But I have to admit that I feel like my preferred way to play Maracaibo every single time I play it into the future is likely going to be cooperative. I know we're kind of veering back towards that, but I just liked doing all that Euro-y stuff, and then feeling like I could take big risks. We're working together, and not feeling like I'm probably just going to come last again. And maybe that's just because I always play with Nick. But, it just had a different vibe to it. I just felt more tension in a way, which is kind of strange in the cooperative version than I did in the competitive, because maybe that's just me being down on myself for my capabilities.
So when I sat down and was putting together my thoughts before we jumped on to record this, I was like, okay, well, I felt the same way, John. I was like, given how I feel about the influence tracks, I think cooperative is the way that I'd want to go, because we haven't talked about all the other things that the expansion adds, but it just it adds this new layers of variability. It adds some really kind of game breaky kind of spots and new story tiles that come out that are just fun and interesting, and it adds a new kind of beginning bonus that you can unlock on your board.
Asymmetries, yeah.
Asymmetries, like the choices and the things that it adds are really fun. And I'm going to be honest, like Nick and I recorded an entire strategy episode on Maracaibo for this podcast, and Uprising breaks all of the rules. Like, that's what I loved about it. I was like, I didn't feel like I was sitting down to play the game and thinking, okay, this is kind of the best way to play this. Not the best way, not that there's ever a best way, but just sort of seeing the path lay out. Because in my opinion, it changes things up so much that a lot of what Nick said he liked about the cooperative mode, that he got to try out different strategies, I felt the room to do that in the competitive mode, because I was like, ooh, there's so much more. There were things slowing our game down, making it harder for us to go around the loop, and there were spots that were like incentivizing me. I was playing this like innkeeper strategy, and it was incentivizing me to do that, and it was just, I just thought that was awesome. And this is the first time I played Maracaibo where I, about halfway through, legitimately thought I had a chance to beat Nick. I've never thought that before. And I totally credit that to Uprising. And at the end of the day, I think I only lost to him by like 10 points. I was
close.
So close.
I was not close.
I feel like there's a meme here of like Anastasia, like a picture of like you holding your hands to the sky, just being like, "Thank you, Uprising." Like,
no, so I loved the opportunities that it presented me. And so when we finished that competitive game, I was like, I don't think I'd ever want to go back. I was just like, I would play this way if it weren't for the military. And this says a lot about how we play games, that like John or Nick, especially this game, I've been such a tag along. They both taught me the game. I've never read the rules. I probably should. I might understand military better if I just sat down and read the freaking rulebook.
Yeah.
So clearly, I didn't even realize there was. I knew there was like a hostage thing. I knew there were other ways to play. But the fact that you're telling me right now, and I'm admitting to my naivete, that is there. That's it. I'm done. Competitive Maracaibo, no influence track. Haven't even played it. That's the only way I want to play Maracaibo again in the future. Poor Nick. I don't even think he wants to play it that way, but that's what we're gonna do, Nick. That's what we're gonna do until I get sick
totally
of it.
Play it that way. I don't know why. I don't know what you think I have against
I
that.
think I'm the one who's going to be sad in that situation, because I definitely do think I preferred the cooperative way to do it. But
No, we could do that too. It's so fun, Jacques. It is really fun, but
it's just a different experience, right? And also going back to the difference between co-op and competitive is those asymmetries that we briefly alluded to. There's a whole bunch of them, like 24, I think, something around there. And at the start of the game, you draw 3 of them and choose one, and it's another unlock that you have on your board. And when we played cooperatively, I was frequently just like, oh, that's so cool over there. How did you just do that? Oh man, you get that huge discount and you have so much money. That's amazing. And then we played with these, competitively, and instantly my little gremlin inside my brain came out of its cave and was just like, Nick's asymmetry is better than mine, and I am very sad about that. And this is not balanced. And blah, 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 blah. And I told that gremlin to shut up and go back into the cave, and he just kind of glowered at me.
This is a little bit of a thing, John. Though you don't like asymmetries. Like you say that about every game with asymmetries.
I want to like them, but I so frequently have the grass is greener. Yeah, I can't help but have that little grouch inside me feel like, oh, that one is better. And I even said it. And then 15 minutes later, I took it back because I realized.
Yours was awesome.
And I took it back and I was like, oh, actually, mine's great because of this other thing that I didn't realize. But, for a full 20 minutes, I was wrestling with that silly gremlin. And I just remember thinking in those 20 minutes, like, if we were playing cooperatively, I would be super psyched about the fact that I feel like Nyx is more powerful. Even though ultimately I feel like I said, I rescinded that. But in the moment, those emotions are valid, I think, or at least they matter to the fun.
Yeah, the home ports are weird. I think they're really cool. I like them, and I agree. They don't totally feel balanced. I mean, they're probably okay balanced, but I'm glad they're in the game, just because it lets you try new fun stuff. And
you can play without them too. Like if you truly hate them, you can flip them over, and then that upgrade just gets you a new compass for your quests. So if you're like me and you just a big grouch about them in competitive, then at least the game has an emergency valve for that.
Yeah, that's a good point. Another frill that they put into this game are new, what they call the legacy tiles, the setup tiles that you put onto the board at the beginning of the game, which, by the way, is one of the things I really like about Maracaibo, that initial setup where different aspects of the game are kind of open or unlocked in a game, I think is a nice way to generate just a little bit of extra variability in the gameplay. And I think that some of the new tiles are wacky fun. The new Dutch city is crazy. You lose entirely. You just forsake your allegiance to one of the other European nations and then get a bunch of money from the Dutch who are like, yep, we'll keep paying you as long as you're ruining everyone else's life out there.
Yeah.
And then there's another one where you can explore a temple in the jungle, and anything that makes the exploration strategy better, I think, is always worth it to put into this game, and also just thematically very cool.
Yeah, there's one that connects one part of the loop with another part of the loop, essentially turning it into doubling the length of the overall loop once per game. Like you go from 13 back to 2 again. Like what?
Yeah, just that's what I mean. Those tiles are fun, and maybe the fun of those will wear off after a few plays, although there's quite a few of them, and that you can pull out. And so, over time, they may just kind of be what they are. But there were also just tons of cards in the deck, too. The new cards with crazy abilities. And maybe some of that's just the fun of finding new cards in the deck, right? But, it did just seem like I was pulling up these cards and I was like, I mean, I can't even play this, but like, man, if I drew that in my starting hand in another game, that would be really fun. Like I just, and I liked that freshness, and I liked the way that I felt like it made me feel like I could, do some different strategies around that. But one downside to an expansion like this, where there's so many modules, and I'm actually not a huge fan of modular expansions like this, because maybe this is the way that I sort of play board games, or, kind of look at my collection or whatever. But like, I tend to not want to have that much choice when I sit down to play a game. Like, I don't really like, do you want to play it this way, this way, this way, or this way? I tend to just want to be like, there is one rule set to play the game. I'm not talking about strategy. I'm talking about like literally how to play the game. So I'm not someone who generally likes modular expansions, because for me, it creates AP before we even start. Like, which way do I want to play?
Yeah.
So I say all of that, but I do think it's really fun that there's like this co-op, this competitive, that there's all of these options. But what often can happen in modular expansions like this is that there are cards and things that now no longer apply depending on the game that you're playing, right? So Nick, you brought up this Dutch city that was really cool. And here I am being like, oh, it's going to be so cool when we play this next time without the fighting. But I don't think we could play with that city, right?
Yeah.
Like, because the whole reason that city is so powerful is you have to sacrifice one of your influence tracks. And if you don't do that, then you can't play that one. And there's other cards and other upgrades and things that you can't use in the cooperative game, because again, there's no influence tracks. So that is the one downside to me. And I want to say, I think that's a flaw of... Not even a flaw. I think that's just something that can happen when you have so many modules. Like, not everything is going to work perfectly, right? But it is a little bit of a downside, because you are inherently limiting the things you can do based on the way that you play. Like, you're going to come across things and you're going to have that kind of moment of like, ugh, this would have been super cool, but I can't even play that in this game, or it's just less.
I remember at one point in our cooperative game, you got really excited about a card in your hand and you showed it to us, and then we're like, oh, that doesn't really work in the cooperative game. It's just really bad. If we were playing competitively,
really
it'd be amazing. And you were deflated. You're like, okay, well, fine. I guess I will play that card then.
I wish that there was, like, we've talked about this in Arc Nova, like, when we never play with any of the interactive versions of the card, but everyone has another benefit to it that's from the solo game, but that, we use a designer variant, whatever, that lets you just use that. And it's never as good as if you were using it as an attack card, but it's still like a benefit. And I feel like I wish that was the case here with some of these cards, that there was like an alt that's like, well, if you're not playing with the influence tracks, this card does X. And maybe that's asking for too much, but I wish that was there.
There's a bit of a catch-all in that, if a card gives you influence and you're not playing with the influence tracks, you get 2 points. But that doesn't apply to all of the effects, for sure.
I agree. I think that those like clunky points exist. And then what you were saying about the like module selection, I also agree with. Like, what happens when we sit down and John's like, I don't want to play with the home ports. And I'm like, but I like the home ports. Like, there's a navigation that comes there with module-based expansions that, having a choice of how you want to play is nice. And also, it just requires an extra navigation. So it's something to be aware of when you're considering this expansion, for sure.
Yeah. Well, overall, I really like this expansion. In general, I'm not actually one for expansions to games. I'll be honest, I would not have bought this expansion if it did not have a cooperative mode in there. And I'm not necessarily like a big cooperative person. I just was super intrigued at the idea of playing Maracaibo, which is a game I quite like, cooperatively, much in the same way that I was super intrigued to try Concordia in partnerships with Concordia Venus. Like, it had a very similar feel to me in that I was playing it and I'm like, this feels like that other game, but it also feels like something totally different. Like, it's alternate, reality Maracaibo, even though, everything I'm doing feels very similar. It just has a different, I don't know, aura to it or something like that. And I really dug it. I'm definitely going to try to play more cooperative in the future, but I will definitely bow to trying some fully competitive Uprising as well. I think maybe I just like the idea of working together instead of just kind of like falling off to the wayside score wise.
I'm really glad you brought up Concordia Venus, because I do think that's a nice comparison to this. And yet I say that, and I really don't like Concordia Venus.
You got to try it again. I'll get you to try it again someday.
I know. I will try it again. I know John loves it, and I
You have yet to be convinced. But you became
yet to be
relatively
convinced.
convinced on Maracaibo.
But I did, and that's actually why I wanted to bring it up. Is like, having said that, like I said, playing cooperative Maracaibo with you guys was one of my favorite times playing that game ever. Like, and it was a nice reprieve from, do I have any chance of beating Nick here? Even though I was still trying to beat Nick, but it was just fun, and so like I think that opening that door up is really cool. And the reason I tie it to Venus is because I do want to say that if you're listening to this and you're thinking, oh, well, I don't like Concordia Venus, so like I don't think I'm going to like Cooperative Maracaibo. I am like you, and I liked Cooperative Maracaibo. Like it's different, very different to me than Venus. And I think it's just that because you're playing with Jacques, you are still being competitive with someone, and so and yet helping each other and still trying to play your best game, especially if you're, like, it's really fun. And so I will very happily play that. I do think that there's a part of me that's just eager to explore more Uprising competitively, because I do think it's probably my best chance at ever beating Nick at this game. And apparently that's all I want to do and then I'll never want to play Maracaibo again. This is like the end. No, but I think for me, what Uprising has done is it's actually breathed new life into the game.
Oh, for sure.
And I think that I honestly had kind of reached a point where I was like, I'm never going to get as good at this game as I'd like to be. And for some reason, this game is in my head. It's just, it was a game where I just felt like it would take me dozens and dozens of more plays and to get to a level. And it seemed like the strategy of it had already been mined, and I just didn't know where my future was with it. And you add in Uprising, and it was like, this is a totally new experience. It opens up so many new pathways, and it upends, like I already said, a lot of the strategy and stuff we've talked about. So I really like that. So I think I'm just eager to keep exploring it. And I admit it, I was pretty cool on the whole thing. I wasn't thinking any of it was going to be that great, and I'm very happy to have been wrong.
I do want to very briefly say that, I keep mentioning these 4 scenarios, and there's one I haven't mentioned at all. The other cooperative scenario, which I also would like to try at some point, works just the same way that we've said, but it has this additional rescue mechanic where you actually have to find somebody and then rescue them, in addition to beating Jacques and in addition to removing all the cubes. And I think that also sounds like a cool aspect of the game to explore at some point. It just seems like there's quite a bit in the box. We've only really scratched the surface with just a couple of plays.
I'm sure it's not a surprise based on the things that I've said already, but as far as this expansion goes, I think that the co-op really adds a nice new way to approach the game. The frills feel like nice little expansion bonuses, but for me, the co-op is really what makes it interesting. So if that's what appeals to you, or if you just play tons and tons of Maracaibo and you just need a couple more options, then I think this expansion is good for you. I'm actually trying to place for myself how highly I would rate this expansion, and I think it's up there with Feast of Odin Norwegian's expansion.
Wow, that's high praise.
Are you gonna buy it? Are you you?
I don't even own Maracaibo, so.
Oh, that's so funny. You know what? Maracaibo's never gonna get played in my house. I'm gonna give you my copy, and then you can hold it for the 2 of us. That's so funny.
Well, I think that's going to pretty much wrap up our thoughts on this one. As you can, I'm sure, infer, we're certainly going to be exploring this one more in the future. I had a lot of fun talking about this. I also had just a lot of fun playing with it and exploring this with the 2 of you. I'm curious, if anyone out there listening has any thoughts about this, if you've tried Maracaibo, or if you have worries about it, or any real comments at all, we'd love to hear from you. Please leave a comment on the YouTube version of this episode. You can find a link to it in the description of this podcast. And let's keep the conversation going, because there's a lot to say about this. If anyone has actually played either of these scenarios that we have not, we'd love to hear about that as well. Thanks again so much for listening.